Hey everybody, welcome to Ink and Effort, the podcast where we turn your writing dreams into a productive reality one page at a time. I'm James Fox, and I'm going to be your host. We've got a pretty cool special guest today that's going to talk to us all about their writing routine and the things that they do to keep going strong with the writing no matter where they are in the world. One of the things that I think is most important and most critical about being a professional author is consistency. And in order to be consistent, you have to have a routine. I think that with consistency comes discipline, and with discipline comes word counts. So establishing a writing routine helps build discipline and consistency, and I mean, honestly, those are your key factors to becoming a prolific writer. Regular writing time becomes a habit, and if you can make it a habit, then it becomes something that you can rely on, no matter whether you have the motivation to write or not. There are days where I sit down and I have nothing up here. I mean, I'm drawing a blank. I am not feeling creative. I'm grumpy. I don't want to write. But because I've got that muscle memory and I know that I write from 7 a.m. to 11 a.m. every day, no matter what, the brain kicks in. And eventually I find that words are flowing and I'm not grumpy anymore, which is a bonus. And everything just works. And I think that all of that comes from the routine. It comes from the discipline of making it happen no matter what. And I think that as a new writer in particular, you can do yourself a really huge favor by pushing that and trying to develop a routine early. The other thing that a routine can do is really increase your productivity. You maximize your writing time and you lead to higher word counts and more completed projects. I'm a big data person. I love tracking the data, how many words, how many edits, total words, gross words, net words, how much time I spent actually with my butt in the chair, hands on keys by chalk. Thanks, Brandon Sanderson. And what the result was, right? I mean, if I spent 6 hours in a chair and I got 600 words, I'm doing something wrong. And so I tried to take notes very diligently about that routine and well, not even the routine, about that data set so that I can look at the routines that I want to establish. I learned very early on with the data that I collect that evenings were just not for me. They were not a way for me to be a productive writer. I would beat my head against the wall for hours and get nothing. Whereas you put me 2 hours in the morning and I'll do 5,000 words. So again, everybody's routine is going to be different. Everybody's level of discipline is going to be different. Find what works for you. Find what keeps your butt in the chair, hands on the keys. That's the most important thing. A couple other things I want to talk about before we get to our special guest is mental preparation. I think that a consistent routine helps your mind prepare for the writing process. People are going to disagree with me on that, and that's that whole pantser, plotter thing. But I think that writing is like working out and lifting weights, right? Like you can actually like get into a routine where your body is ready. Like when you run every morning, before you run, your body is producing the chemicals to help you run. So I think the same thing happens with your brain. You ease that transition from daily activities to focused writing if you can just do it consistently. And then the other thing is you actually, like I've noticed this with myself, is that like you actually start to signal to your brain early that it's time to be creative. I can't help but be creative in the morning, which makes it tough when I'm like traveling and like speaking on panels first thing in the morning, because I'm just kind of like all over the place. And if you know me, I'm kind of all over the place anyway. But it gets really bad in the morning. I mean, you cannot have a coherent conversation with me at all most mornings because I'm just so out in La La Land and thinking about all kinds of different stuff. This morning it was all astrophysics. I mean, I've been doing orbital insertion math in my head for the entire morning, and now I'm doing this. So this is great. The other thing I think that establishing a really good routine can do is reduce procrastination. I mean, I don't know how you guys are with procrastination, but I will put just about every task off for as long as possible, and then slam through it at the last possible minute and squeak in under the deadline. And then lie to everybody and tell them that I've been working the entire time. But that's just my process. I don't know. I feel like I have to have that like stress weighing on me, or I am not creative. And then work-life balance. We're going to talk a little bit about that. And I think that one of the things that authors really kind of get into a rut about is their work-life balance. We have a propensity to beat ourselves up, right? We have a propensity to to treat ourselves badly when we're not putting words down, or when we're not putting as many words down as we can, or we're not doing as many words as somebody else is doing, or somebody's produced 12 books and we haven't produced any. That's okay. It's a process. It's different for everybody. And, what we want to do here on Ink and Effort is really try to encourage you to find yours. That's the first step to being a good author. You can have a great idea, but if you don't know how to get those words down consistently, then it's just going to stay an idea. And that's what we're here for. So on that note, I want to bring in our special guest for episode 1, which is called Finding Your Routine, A.K. Duboff. Amy, how are you?
Hey, thanks for having me on. I am doing great.
Great. I'm so excited to have you as our guest because you're all over the place all the time, and you're still an extremely prolific writer, and you write such complicated stuff that it takes a lot of time, planning, dedication to get those stories out. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit about your process and just, some of the challenges that you face, how you've overcome those, and how you stay diligently writing.
Well, my process when I'm starting a new project is I am definitely a plotter at heart, but I do need to do a little bit of discovery with those projects. And I like, especially if I'm starting a new world, I like to do a little bit of discovery writing with some of the world building aspects. So I'll have a general framework of what I'm going to be working with, but I like to just play around. So when it comes to actually getting those words on the page, I usually won't actually be writing the book in order. I'll have a few scenes in my mind and we'll just jump around to those different aspects of it and figure out how those pieces might fit together within the general framework that I have. And for example, last night I had this manuscript I've been working on. It's about 40,000 words long right now, but I had all of these chunks that were just from random bits. And I realized that as I was dumping them into the document, they weren't at all in the order that they needed to be in. So I spent a few hours going through and figuring out how all of those pieces put together. And that's just how this particular book needed to happen for me. But others, when I get deeper into a series, especially, I'll have a fairly detailed outline that I'll stick to pretty closely over the course of writing it. So it's just each project even can be a little bit different. So you need to give yourself that bandwidth to just see what a particular project is going to demand as far as how you're going to approach it, because what might work for you on one thing might not be the best strategy for another. So you have to be flexible and listen to yourself.
Yeah, we've had the opportunity to collaborate on a project too, and how does that work with collaborative projects where you're co-authoring with somebody? I write straight through. I start chapter 1, I end the final chapter, and I know that when we were working together, it kind of drove you a little bit crazy because when I hit a roadblock, I'd like stop. It was a full stop. It's like I need to figure the chapter out, and you're like, well, you could jump ahead. You know what happens next? I'm like, nope, can't. But tell me how that works with collaborations, because you do a lot of collabs, and that's got to add a layer of complication to your process.
It does, and I do think that having a plan of where a story is going to be going, it is helpful when you're doing those collaborations, because you know that you're going to be on the same page with it, especially if you have a situation where you're managing that project and have some expectations about what you want the final product to be. If the person that you're working with who's kind of under you in that arrangement, if they're just going off and producing words and you don't really know what they're working on, you might get it back. And I, as a writer, absolutely detest having to delete large chunks of text. And I know that is part of the process. I have one great author friend, and they'll know exactly who they are. They will write 250,000 words and then cut that down to 150,000 words. And like, you just deleted an entire novel. Oh, and that just, it pains me to think about all of that time that went into it. But that's just part of their process, and they can produce really tightly plotted, awesome books going through that. For me, can't do it. So when I'm working with the co-authors, I like to make sure that we have enough guide rails on there that we know kind of where we're going. With you, I know we ended up rewriting the book several times to get it right, but I'm really happy with how it ended up in that final draft. But yeah, but that also was one of the first books that you had written. You had a lot of discovering to do about you as an author. You were newer coming into that.
Well, and for me, it was about matching voice, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I know, like the first draft, we got like 75% done with the manuscript, and I didn't even let you read it. I was just like, it's not the right voice. I'm still writing my book. It's not it tonally. It doesn't match, and I just straight deleted that off of Google Drive. Like I didn't even keep it because I was just like, nope, it's wrong, right? But so the collaborative effort is neat, but how do you stay diligent with that? Like, you know, with your own writing, especially since I know you like work on collabs while you're also writing your own stuff sometimes. So how do you keep your butt in the chair and your hands on the keys? How do you keep that going?
Well, I will admit that I have not been as diligent over the last few years as I was at one point. So I would like to speak to both aspects of my career in that respect, because I think that it is important for people to know that you will have some times that it's not necessarily working for you. And I'm getting back into it now. But so when I was being really diligent with everything, I could have 6,000 word days, and I would break up my day into chunks. So I'd have 1,500 word goals that I would do there. So if I would start work sometime between 10 and 10:30, and by lunchtime I would want to have 1,500 words, and I wouldn't eat until I had that, because that was my motivation. Like, I'm gonna be hungry, so if I just sit down and I get my words in, I can eat and take a little break, watch a half-hour episode of a TV show or something, and chill for a bit. And then after lunch I would do another 1,500 word check, have another break, and then another 1,500 words, and then I'd have a few hours off in the evening. My husband would come home from work, and we'd hang out for a bit, and he has to get up very early for work, so I would stay up after he went to bed, and then I would get as many more words as I could. But I'd have the 1,500 word goal, but if it got to be more than that, great. And then only when I had those words done, I would go to bed.
Wow.
And that kind of dedication, that was when I was my most productive. And that is what I would ultimately like to get back to. Maybe not aim for the 6,000 words, but pick whatever word goal works with the other things that I have going on. But then I fell out of routine, and I would be like, well, I'll write if I'm going to write, because like the COVID lockdowns happened, like weird stuff was going on in the world. I'd had just a big international move that had happened, and it was not good. But because I didn't have that discipline to do it, words did not happen. So I've been tracking my word count for years, and I can go back through that spreadsheet, and there are just all of these 0 days on there. So I don't remember which year it was. I think it may have been 2021. I decided, as a New Year's resolution, I need to write every day. And if it's just 100 words, that's okay. But I'm going to do at least 100 words a day, just to keep the muscle memory going. And I made a commitment, and sure enough, I have not missed a day in there, regardless of traveling, because the 100 words, I can get that down in 5 minutes. It's like, if I cannot find 5 minutes in this day to like even just type it out on my phone in a note that I can copy into a manuscript later, like that's on me. Like there's no reason that I can't do that. So, and then this year I committed, I'm going to do at least 200 word minimum, because the 100 is like, that's really sad. So I would like to continue ratcheting that up, like 500 words a day, like that should be doable. So you need to set those goals for yourself. I've also found that if I don't have a deadline for a book, that it's going to languish a lot longer than if I'm like, well, I'm ticking down to an actual release date here. I need to make sure, and I know I'm going to have 6 weeks on the back end for all of the post writing stuff that has to get done. So like, let's do it.
So I think one of the things that authors kind of are scared of but shouldn't be is making writing feel like a job. Mm-hmm. Right? And like having deadlines, having goals, like having milestone markers, that you can hit. Like people kind of freak out about that. Like, oh no, that squelches my creativity. But it actually doesn't. I find that it bolsters it. It helps reinforce it, because like you said, like I'm doing 200 words a day, no matter what. And then you can actually like map it out and be like, hey, if I'm going to have a 100,000 word book, I can do the math, and I can tell you exactly when that book should be done. And there's my deadline, right? Yeah. And if you finish early, awesome, great for you. Like that's what you want, right? But
And more than that, you almost never is it going to come in at exactly 100 words or 200 words in that. It's, it's going to be 150 or 300 or 350. And it's just having that discipline to get in there and do it. But the issue that I've run into recently is I set that low goal for myself. So I know that's only going to take me, 10 minutes of sitting down and doing this. And so I was like, well, it's 11:30 at night, so I should probably get those words in. So that's why I would like to increase that minimum commitment, because that's going to make me do it at a time where I'm going to have a chance of that I'm sitting down to do 200 minimum, but it's going to turn into 1,500 or 2,000 words because I'm giving myself the time to do it. And once you're in that flow state, and it's that creativity is you're in the scene, you're working through it, it's going to be much easier to get those words out. It's just make sure that you give yourself the opportunity to get into that state and let the words happen rather than artificially constraining yourself by not giving the time.
Right. Let's talk about that flow state for a little bit, because that's something that every veteran author I've ever talked to talks about, like getting into the flow state. Everybody talks about it. But when I first started, I was like, what does that mean? What are they doing? Flow state? Let's talk about that for a minute, because I think that is something critical to understand. There's a momentum to being creative. And I think that's kind of what they're talking about, although I'm still not entirely sure. But
well, it's not just with creative endeavors. I have experience with the flow state with doing other kinds of work. I mean, it can happen with data entry, or something that can be mundane to a lot of people. It's just it's getting into a highly focused state where the other things just fade to the background and you're fully in the moment, and that task that you're performing is the only thing that's happening for you right there. And when you're in that hyper focused state, you get out of that headspace that with creative endeavors where you're self-editing and thinking too much about what exactly you're putting on the page. It's just letting the words flow. And more often than not, what's produced when you're in that state and you're not actively trying to edit it and fine tune everything is going to be at that standard that you'll look back at later and go, wow, that's actually pretty darn good. I don't really need to do a whole lot to this, because you're in that optimized production mode.
Yeah. I mean, I call myself a momentum writer. I mean, we've talked about this previously, where it's like the longer I can stay at my keyboard and not be interrupted and not stop, the faster I write, the more in flow I am. And time just passes. I mean, I'll sit at my keys and I'll look up and be like, oh my God, it's dark outside. Right. And so I think that a lot of people are kind of scared of like losing themselves to that momentum, because they don't feel like they're writing good words. I mean, I say this all the time. I write lots of words, none of them are good, right? So can you talk to that? Because I feel like I'm at a point in my career where I know that's not true. but you have a lot more experience than I do. So tell me what you think about that.
Yeah. So I will bluntly say that as I am writing a book, the entire time I am writing it, I am convinced it is the worst thing that I have ever written in my life. And it is not until I read through the entire manuscript after I have finished it that I'm like, okay, it's actually, this might be pretty good. Or maybe there will be sections like this needs work, but it's salvageable. But really the entire time that I'm working on anything, I think that it's awful. And that is not an uncommon experience. After talking with some other author friends, they'll say the same thing. So really the most important thing is to just get the draft finished. Yeah. Because you can salvage almost anything in there. I know you deleted that one whole manuscript. That was not a necessary action, that they could have been edited. And the main thing is really just there's a big mental block that I have often encountered and heard other people talk about with just staring at a blank page. And that is one of the most intimidating things.
It's
I personally find
staring into infinity, right?
Yeah, exactly. I personally find that the first like 10 to 15,000 words of a manuscript are the most difficult for me. Some people really like the intros and the middles bog them down. The middles are where I actually start to have an easier time with it because I understand the world, I understand the characters, and I have a good sense of what the plot's going to be going forward. So that's where the words really start to flow for me. It's when I am staring into that, I don't really know what's happening here. It's going to be much more difficult to get those words down. And so if you can just push through and get a draft of some sort, there's infinite opportunity to go in and edit and expand the world details, refine your dialogue, work on characterization. Those are all things that can happen in the editing stage. So just getting an outline there, you can respond to those words then and augment them rather than just worrying about getting anything down. So just even if you have to write, and then they walked to the place and something happened, like if that gets you past that bridge that you're having a difficult time with, you can go back and expand that entire scene later.
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about this where I do like the double bracket, right? Like if I hit a point where I'm like, I don't know what's happening here, combat sequence. Right, I'll just like double bracket in combat sequence and then just keep writing whatever happens afterwards. And then at the end, I just control F and search double brackets and go through and solve all those problems. You know, the point is flow. The point is go, vomit draft, just get it down. Right, like there's editors, there's readers, there's people who are there eager to support you in your effort, but if you don't get the story down, they can't help.
Exactly.
I want to talk to you a little bit about tracking your progress, because you and I are weird in that we both like track our data. We're both data people. Like we want to know exactly what's going on with our writing. So I want to talk about like, you know, regular writing sessions, tracking your progress, and how you're trying to improve over time. Not just increasing your word counts, but like tracking time of day of writing, tracking like, you know, are you doing sprints? Are you, you know, like, is the goal to get as many words down as possible in a set amount of time? Or is the goal, I want to consistently do 6,000 words a day again?
I don't keep quite as detailed notes as you do. What I am currently tracking is just my daily word count and the bulk of the tasks that I was working on. There are some days that will be split between multiple projects, but whatever one has the majority of that effort is the one that's going to get noted on the spreadsheet. So that will be either editing. So I'll say like, you know, editing X project name or writing X project name and that. I have been at this for long enough that I know I tend to be an evening writer, but with that said, my evenings will be far more productive if I've done writing earlier in the day. And I think that's been one of my downfalls in the last few years with production is I haven't been prioritizing getting words in early in the day. And so I get to the evening and it's like, okay, so I need to go through that entire, as you were talking about in the intro, that kind of mental preparation and getting into that mindset. So if I've done that earlier in the day, I'm sort of primed for it already. So I can sit down in the evening and more quickly jump into it. Whereas if I just wait until the evening, then I need to do the entire preparation and then actually do the work. And that is going to ultimately lead to a much lower yield.
Do you think that you use the morning stuff as kind of a primer so that then you are thinking about it and solving your problems throughout the course of the day?
I think that is a good portion of it. So if I can get down a little bit and kind of re-immerse in the world and the scene, then it just that back of mind percolation can happen throughout the day of just as you know you're doing the dishes, you can be pre-writing the dialogue in your head and kind of talking to yourself as you're dealing with the soap suds, and that's it really does make a difference. And when I still had a day job, I was commuting on a bus for the last few years, and that bus ride was a perfect opportunity to just kind of sit there and do all of that mental exercise of thinking through. So you can find those moments throughout your day of where you can set yourself up. So when you actually sit down to write, you have a very good idea of what you want to do, the sort of tone that you want to set with the scene. And it really helps the words flow a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I relate to that quite a bit. I want to do that, but I'm really just like, I have to sit down in the morning and I just have to power through. And then when I come up for air, I got to do something else. Mm-hmm. Like my brain is usually a wrung out mess. My back hurts, like my butt's asleep. Like I need to go lift some rocks or, like mill some wood or do something else. And then I found that I check out. And the second I check out, I'm done. I got to wait till tomorrow. But I aspire to do that because I feel like I have good ideas at night. I just don't want to go back to the chair.
Yeah. Well, and it might be that you need to be in a different writing space. So oftentimes I'll be at my computer at my desk when I'm doing the daytime work, but then I want to be on the couch with my laptop in the evening, and that's the easier space for me. But one of the things that I discovered about myself is I have this really big, ugly pair of shooting range grade earphones that I put on, and I have trained myself that when those are on, I am in focus mode, and having some kind of somatic thing that happens that can help get your mind focused there. So it has the benefit of blocking out the noise, but there's also just a physical pressure on my head that like helps me focus more. So even if it's perfectly quiet around me, it still is helpful for me to have those on.
So you put those on when you're writing?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. See, that's the kind of stuff that we're trying to figure out here on this podcast. Is like the little tips and tricks that I mean, that's awesome because that's almost like Pavlovian at that point, right? Like it's
absolutely it is.
Yeah.
Like, So I make a concerted effort to put them on when I want to work. But if I'm finding that I get an email or something that I need to respond to, I will take them off because I don't want them associated with other tasks. Like that is a specific, I am doing creative work right now, and I want that to be my kind of mental trigger for getting into that.
I was actually speaking to a romance author who always puts a heating pad on her when she's writing. Like when she goes in to write, she puts a heating pad on, and like that's again. Like it's those like weird things where it's like you're classically conditioning yourself that okay, the headset's on, it's go time, it's writing time, nothing else matters. I kind of computers and phones and whatever have those like focus mode things now where you like turn stuff off. I kind of want to do that, but I'm also terrified.
I like using focus mode in Word. Yeah. It's not going to completely close you off from everything, but it does help to just have all the menu bars go away and I like using the dark mode in Word. So it's just this nice dark screen with the white text on there, and it really helps block out everything, especially since I do a lot of my writing at night, as I mentioned. So it's just like me and the dim glow of the screen there, and it just helps me block out the rest of the world.
All right, so second to last question here. Talking about routines, it makes it sound so heavy and so much like work and like, oh, I want to be an author because I want to have freedom and I want to be creative and I want to be whimsical and carefree. And there's a lot of that, right? Like I'm not gonna lie and say, oh, it's like the worst, most drudgerous job there is, because it's not. It's actually fantastic. But let's talk about the personal satisfaction and fulfillment that you get from fulfilling your routines. Because I know like, if I hit my word count goal for the day, like I get that dopamine hit. I feel great, So talk about that for, what do you try to plan as your like dopamine hits? I mean, you were talking about like, I get lunch, like I reward myself with food. I am allowed
to eat. Yes. So you can have some like basic life fulfilling things that like if you're really struggling with motivation, like hunger is a great one that can definitely get you going there.
Yes.
But a little bit kinder would be things like you don't get to watch any TV until you get your words in for the day, or like as soon as you get in 2,000 words, then you can take a break and you are allowed one half-hour episode of a show, but you are not allowed to sit down and watch a movie until you have all 5,000 words down for the day. So it's just, if you can spend time doing a fun luxury activity like consuming media, then you can instead reallocate that to the words. And if you're motivated to do those other things, then those words are going to come down a lot faster, because you want to get them done quickly. And by trying to get them done quickly, that will get you out of edit mode, which will help you more easily get into that flow state, which will make you write even faster and better. So why not set some of those goals for yourself and just make it happen?
There you go. Amy, you've shared with the world that the key to being a professional author is to link your dopamine to word count. Yep. There you go. All right. Tell us what's on deck for you. Tell our listeners where they can find you. Give us your social media and the book you want people to check out.
Well, I definitely recommend starting with my original Cataclysm series. The Fractured Empire box set is a great way to pick that one up, and I have follow-on box sets for all of the other things within that larger Cataclysm universe. So that's a great spot to dive in, and you can find that on Amazon and Kindle Unlimited. And you can go to my website at amyduboff.com and find me on most social media platforms at Amy Duboff. And I also will have a new series coming out, hopefully later this year, that is tentatively titled Spaceship of the Ancients, and Stranded will be book 1 in that. Name's potentially subject to change, but I'm liking them, so probably will be set, and hopefully a late fall, winter release for that.
All right. Well, that means everybody's got to follow you to make sure that they are up to date on the name and the release time frame. So, absolutely. All right, Amy, thank you so much for your time, and that was super useful information. I mean, I am going to put some snacks on my desk, but I'm not allowed to touch them until my word count is done.
There you go. So you can have your 500 word increments, and you're not allowed to
one bite of chocolate candy bar every 500 words.
There you go. I love it.
All right. Thank you, Amy.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. All right. That was super insightful. I mean, I think there's no better way to motivate you than like food and sleep and like all of that stuff. I mean, the whole point to all of this, right? Like, all jokes aside, the whole point of this is find what works for you. Set a goal that's achievable and start achieving them, because you're going to get that fulfillment of like, hey, I made my 100 words. You know, Amy, 100 words a day, 5 minutes time. If you can't find 5 minutes, I don't know what to tell you, right? Then go to 10 minutes. See what you can do in 10 minutes. Can you do 200 words? Maybe you can do 300 words. Remember, it's a momentum game. The more you write, the more you're going to want to write, the more you can write. Build that in. Build it just like working out, right? Like, reward yourself with a walk afterwards. You know, anything that gives you enjoyment, anything that gives you that sense of accomplishment, that sense of fulfillment. Writing is hard. Being creative is hard. So allow yourself to feel good about it. Don't beat yourself up about it. Don't create a routine that's painful, because then you're not going to want to do it, right? The whole point to all of this, and what we're trying to do here with Ink and Effort, is we want you to keep writing. We want you to keep pushing. Remember, it's the ink and the effort that brings story to life. There you go. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and follow us on all our social media platforms. They'll be in the comments below. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next episode for setting realistic writing goals. A very good follow-up to Amy. We're going to have another awesome special guest, and I look forward to seeing you then. Put some words down.